Oh, here's an interesting question. I'm going to go to chat again. So Courtney says that they've been listening to podcasts from Spain, and they're really easily able to understand things, even though like it's for native speakers,
Cool.
and at an advanced level.
Congrats.
But they just went to Spain and had a lot of trouble understanding real life Spaniards.
Yeah.
Why?
I feel yeah. I feel this problem a lot. Um, so what I have found is that when people speak just in the street, they mumble and they talk very fast, and they just like they just I, I guess they just devoice a lot of the sounds that you would expect. They don't enunciate particularly well. Um, and the context of being on the street is very different than the context of being in a podcast. When you understand what the podcast is about or the context of the conversation generally, and they're speaking clearly into a microphone, uh, it is easier to follow that than if you bump into somebody on the street and they immediately start talking to you about something. Actually, somebody in our course server posted a video of Ben talking on one of our videos versus an interview between two people, and he was like, "I can understand Ben perfectly, and I cannot make any sense of what's happening in this conversation." Even though both of them were mic'd up and the audio quality was great, and the difference was Ben had written a script that had clear ideas that were clearly expressed. Whereas this conversation, the person speaking, they would talk about an idea and then go off on a tangent and then go off on another tangent and then come back to the main idea. And so it wasn't enough to just follow one sentence at a time or understand the broader context. You had to keep multiple different contexts in your head in addition to the entire past 30 seconds or 1 minute of the conversation, all readily available so that you could follow all the different trains of thought that were happening. So it wasn't even an issue of the language being difficult. It was an issue of this person was not expressing their ideas with a clarity of thought that was easy to follow.
There's something
So
in
there,
linguistics called like careful speech versus I don't actually remember the opposite of it. But careful speech is basically when somebody's more aware of what they're saying. And there is a marked difference between how people speak in careful speech versus just regular speech.
Mhm.
And it's an unconscious thing. Everybody does it. Like I think it was a fairly famous study where somebody would ask people to like tell a story just about their life, usually something that was like more emotional, and it would record and listen to it. But then also ask that same person to like read something or to quote something or something like that where it's a lot more mentally intensive, and sounds would change all over the place. This person would just say these sounds differently depending on if you're thinking or not. And so that is one of the reasons why the same person might sound different in different contexts. But then also, there's that added level of, at a certain point, we do just speak in ideas, right? If you haven't prepared ahead of time, like a script, or you're trying to get a point across, it's edited down to be more understandable. If you're just trying to say stuff and get it out there and hang out with your friend or whatever, there's a lot more stuff going on. And for me, what's helped understand that easier, so understanding like market vendors and following conversations out in the street, has actually been focusing less on the words and the sentences and more just on the meaning, because that is easier to follow along with. If you're sort of with the conversation and listening to the person who's speaking, you can usually figure out what's happening and follow along and make a joke and whatever. And that's relatively normal, versus if you're trying to say, okay, I'm learning Spanish, I'm here in Spain, I'm going to listen to this person, I got to understand the words and then figure it out. And then you miss a couple words, you go, oh no, what's happening? Right? There's this different level of ability that requires some more abstraction, I think is a good word.
and I would say also inference of
Yeah.
meaning that is separate from the actual words being used.
Yes.
Because if somebody only gives you a third or half of what would otherwise be a complete sentence, you have to be able to infer the other half of the sentence, not by the words, but the meaning of the entire sentence. And so there's an enormous amount of inference that your brain has to do in order to practice understanding people on the street, because they don't speak often in complete ideas, and they don't say all of their words, or they don't finish their sentences.
Yeah.
So
It's more real, right?
yeah. So, it can definitely prepare you. Listening to a podcast will prepare you for the real world, but only up to a certain level. At a certain point, you really do have to just go and talk to people in real life. When there is music in the background, or cars on the street, or they are mumbling and not completing their words, or they're talking in a different direction. All of these things create artifacts in the language that are really difficult to make it difficult to parse the actual sort of correct version of what they're saying if you were to transcribe it. And you'll see this in like transcriptions, where sometimes you just won't be able to hear what people say, and then it'll say like just inaudible. And it's even though that word was inaudible, the sentence as a whole is understandable.
Yeah.
So it is definitely a challenge, and I feel for you, because I experienced the exact same thing. Like, trying to understand some of the like the folks that I run into like at the park or on the street speaking Spanish. Oh man, some of them are just like, they speak so low, and so their words just run together in a way that is unusual for like an actual piece of content where someone has a microphone and is enunciating. It's just a completely different skill set, honestly.
Yeah. But that's part of the reason we do it, right?
Yeah.